Hey guys, Snoopy here. Today we're going to look at the setup cards for 3-player games and base arcs. Um, Unlike with 4-player games, the setup for 3-player games is going to take out 2 clusters, and so that's going to take out 6 planets and anywhere from 8 to 10 building slots. So there's a lot of fun stuff you see with these setup cards, and especially with 3-player, we see 4 different types or scenarios basically where instead of just having mix up 1, 2, and 3, we're going to see a whole lot of variety here. And so the first one looking at is Homelands. And the philosophy for Homelands is that each player has their own home, their home base that they set up in, and there's not a lot of initial entanglement at first. But what's taken out? Well, we see gate 6 and gate 5 are taken out with their clusters, and so that's going to take out quite a bit. And so we have 4 material building slots on 3 planets, 4 fuel building slots on 3 planets, 5 weapon building slots on 3 planets. We have 4 relic building slots on 2 planets and only 1 psionic building slot on 1 planet. So psionic is very rare this game. And in fact, if you just look at the B icon, and the second player in this is going to have a starport most likely on there. So psionics are going to be very rare this game. For the order for this, it'll be blue to start with the initiative, then red, and then yellow will be third player, so they would get the first pick of a leader or a lore card. So blue, then red, then yellow. Let's look at the red player first, or the blue player first. So blue is starting with a city and the relic planet with 2 building slots, and then most likely a starport, and the fuel planet with B in cluster 3, and then they also have ships as well in the third cluster. They have great opportunity to expand. They can expand to the weapon planet or the material planet. They also have another weapon planet they can go to in cluster 2. The ships in the third gate are kind of pinched, so they're not doing a lot right now, but if red or yellow moves those ships, which they most likely do, then those ships can move up to cluster 1 very easily with 2 moves. Now, as far as what the first player blue, what they should focus on, I would definitely think about thinking through how can we get that psionic planet ours. So most likely there's going to be ships there, but if red catapults those ships away from their starport, that's going to be vulnerable. We could raid it, but ultimately what we want is destroy it and build a city of our own. So that's just something to think about, but otherwise, just expanding out, claiming some territory, getting weapons, using fuel, but we need to get better resources because just only relics isn't the best, and then weapons and relics do not really combo together. So we need to find a way to get fuel and possibly material, or really just find a way to get that psionic planet. For red here, red has a material planet with 2 building slots in cluster 1. Then they have a starport most likely with their psionic planet in cluster 2, and then they have ships in the second gate. With this, they can catapult away pretty easily. Same thing with blue, they can catapult out from their starport and go places. And I think they probably were going to look at the gate or the fuel planet in 1. Getting a fuel planet with your material planet makes a lot of sense, especially if we can move before yellow does. So that's something I would think about, is how I could use my ships from B, move 1 in to get a quick fuel city, so that way I can start getting material and fuel and start claiming some spots. Because unlike blue, we are kind of pinched. We don't have this free roaming area. Wherever we are, we're next to somebody. So we're next to blue in cluster 2, and we're next to yellow in cluster 1. So red kind of has a different setup and situation in contrast to blue and in contrast to yellow. And finally, yellow, they're starting with a weapon planet in cluster 1 and then a material planet in cluster 4, and that's probably going to be a starport. Then they have 4 ships or ships in gate 4, and the thing there is that they have access to 2 different planets with 2 building slots, a relic and then a fuel. And so I would definitely think yellow is going to focus on getting that 4th cluster to themselves and protecting that gate. and just thinking through how they can move those ships from the material planet with the starport there and getting some more ships around and getting a firm grip there, because there's a lot of building slots there, and then no one's else is there. So that's what I would think through if I was yellow. Overall, I would say red is perhaps in a worse spot, but they do start with the material city most likely, and that can help them build. And so the question is, can they move to these spots first before others, and then start claiming these building slots? And so I would say that blue probably has the best openness, but as far as planet quality, it's probably between red. Yeah, red probably has the best, and then yellow has the most um, easily controlled area with no one nearby. So that would be my quick assessment for Homelands. All right, guys, now we're looking at Frontiers, which is the next setup card for 3-player. And so for this one, we're going to look at the red player is the first player, then it'll be yellow, and then blue. So it'll be red, then yellow, then blue here. But before we talk about that, let's talk about what's taken out. So again, we have 2 clusters removed. And so instead of seeing 5 and 6 removed from the Homelands, we see the opposite side. So that's 2 and 3 removed. And so that's taking out quite a bit. So what is that leaving us? Well, it's leaving us 4 material building slots on 3 planets, 5 fuel building slots on 3 planets, just 3 weapon building slots on 2 planets, 3 relic building slots on 2 planets, and then we have 3 psionic building slots. So this setup reduces weapons building slots down from the default of 6 to just 3, and it's doing this by just those 2 clusters. And so if you recall last time, weapons or psionic was very few and very hard to get. Now psionics is actually pretty easy to get, and a player actually starts with a psionic city. But weapons is actually much harder, and no one starts with weapons. So that's the thing with Frontiers to note here, is that weapons is not going to be available at the very beginning from taxing, and so you have to move and then build a city if you want to get weapons consistently. So let's look at the player order again. So we have red, then yellow, then blue. And so for red, they're starting on Material Planet up in Cluster 1 with 2 building slots, and a Material Planet in Cluster 4 with most likely a starport. There's nothing in the gate in 4, so that allows them to catapult move out, and they can move to that relic planet in Cluster 4, or they can move to a gate in 5 or a gate in 1 with a catapult movement. Otherwise, the main thing I'm looking at with red is that they have ships in gate 6 up where their C is, and that easily can get either that fuel planet or a psionic planet. And there's a lot of reasons to go for the fuel planet. One is that you can build a starport there and a city there, so you can get more ships there. If you just go for the psionics building slot first, then it may be an issue where you don't have ship support. It's hard to support that planet with just a city. One exception would be if you had like a card like Tool Priests, where you could build ships at starports. But otherwise, I think for red, my first move is going to try to be to go to the fuel planet in Cluster 6 and build a starport and possibly a city there first turn. For the next player, yellow, they're starting with the psionic planet with 2 building slots in Cluster 5. They're starting with a starport most likely in Cluster 1 with the fuel planet there. And then they have gates, just gate 5. So that's really, really strong. I think that the thing with yellow is that they're next to blue with the starport. So they want to build a starport where their psionic planet is most likely. And then they can move those ships down to the relic planet and start doing a psionic relic combo. They also could move ships over to that 2 building slot weapon planet in Cluster 1, where the B is. But I think the first move for them is build a starport, build some ships up in A, where their psionic planet is, and move those ships out, 1 ship out of the gate, and start building up more cities around the relic planet first, and perhaps even the the weapon planet as well. And finally, for blue, so blue is starting with a fuel planet with 2 building slots in cluster 4, and then a material planet in cluster 6, and then they have ships in the first gate at the top. So I think blue is probably in the worst position of the 3 players as far as what they're getting. 2 building slots. They are next to a 2 building slot for a relic, but they want material. And if you recall, there's only 4 material building slots, but one of them is probably gonna have a starport from blue, and then the other one's gonna have a starport from red, most likely in cluster 4. So really, there's only one spot. And so one thing to think about is maybe if red doesn't do anything to move in the ships from gate C and just build in a sneaky starport and start trying to get ships in where their material planet is up in cluster 1, just so you can get more material. Otherwise, material's gonna be really hard to get this game. And so I think if you don't care about fuel, then maybe moving and moving in, attacking yellow. But really, that's the question I have, is that how is blue able to get material, or how is blue able to monopolize and take advantage of all this fuel they have access to? Because they also could get the fuel planet in 6 as well if red doesn't take it first. So that's something to think about, is how can they monopolize fuel. But otherwise, I think this setup is pretty interesting. You have these pockets of yellow has the 5th cluster, blue kind of has the 6th cluster with red contesting, and then blue also has this weird dynamic of being in the middle of cluster 4 while also having the gate in 1. And so really it is this unique situation where instead of everyone being on top of each other, it's just these 2 players in positions, except for in cluster 5, you have yellow, who's the 2nd player, has this pretty big advantage. And so I think that's the question, is will the players pounce on this and try to stop yellow from just building a big fleet in cluster 5, or will they just expand elsewhere and let yellow do their own thing? Okay, so we got our next one, Mixup. And so we see here that, unlike with Frontiers, where you have pockets of 2, all the players are in each cluster, and then one cluster is just empty. And so with this one, for this Mixup, we're taking out clusters 1 and 4. And 1 and 4 are a big deal because those have the most building slots. So we're taking away 10 building slots. And so what is left? Well, we got just 2 material building slots on 2 planets. We got 3 fuel building slots on 2 planets. We got 4 weapon building slots on 3 planets, 3 relic building slots on 2 planets, and then all 4 psionic building slots on 3 planets. So what's interesting with this setup is that psionic is untouched, but material is heavily damaged. And if we already look and we're looking where the Bs are, there's a B on a material planet, which means that there's only one material planet that easily can have a city on it. So that's what makes this setup perhaps the most interesting, where you have a lot of psionics available, not a lot of material, which normally is the other way around. We have our player order as blue, then red, then yellow. So blue is first, red is going second in initiative, and then yellow is going third, which means they would have the first pick in the draft. So let's look at blue's position first. So they have a weapon planet in the corner. They have with 2 slots, and then they have a relic planet in the middle. It's most likely going to be starport. Now that starport is next to a psionic planet with 2 building slots, so something to keep in mind, that you can possibly move in and start immediately taxing or attacking red just off the bat, just to try to claim that city and control that city. One way to do that is by building a ship, moving your ships in, and then building a starport, so you would need like a material and a fuel to do that. But if you had a material and fuel, you could build a ship, move in, and build a starport on top of the red player so that they can't easily build up their fleet. And now you can start attacking them and taxing them and even raiding them. So that's just something to keep in mind because you are going first. And then for their gate, they have this ships in gate 2. And so that's keeping in the red players' ships. So remember, they're going to start with a starport most likely up in cluster 2 with the B. And so you're blocking in those ships by keeping a ship behind. And so that's something that blue, you may want to move your ships to the gate in 6 and claim that psionic planet up there. But you probably want to leave a ship behind so that way red can't follow you as you're leaving. So that's what I would recommend, is that you either move in immediately to invade red in cluster 5, or you move your ships from 6 and leave one behind and move up to the planet in cluster 6 and get that psionic planet. The other option is you can get the one material planet in cluster 6. That also may be worth it too. So the next player is red, so they're going second, and so they have the 2-slot psionic planet, starting with a city most likely on it, and then they have a starport up in cluster 2 on that psionic city. So blue is blocking us in the gate. You have easy access to the material planet in cluster 6, or the the weapon planet in cluster 2. They also have access to a fuel planet where they're starting with their C ships in gate 3. So I think for red, they're in a good spot, but it's almost too good if it makes sense. Like the other players can easily target them and attack them. And so finding ways to spread out, to not have all your eggs in one basket, is what I would recommend for red here, and just seeing what the other players want to do, and then kind of adapting to that. But we'll see. I think you have to take advantage of the psionic city. Like that's just too valuable. And if they let you build a starport there and start building up your fleets ASAP, so that would be my recommendation for red. And then for yellow, you have the relic planet in cluster 2 with 2 building slots, and then next door you have the material planet in cluster 3, and that's most likely going to be a starport. Because of this, you could do 2 cities on the relic planet. I think that would be acceptable because you have that starport next door. You could also move up a ship to the weapon planet and build a starport there. You have a lot of flexibility because you have basically 6 ships almost next to each other. The issue is your gates are kind of blocked by both red and blue. And the trade-off is that you are blocking in the cluster in 5. So I think for yellow, you definitely have a good spot to perhaps get the psionic planet in cluster 6. Definitely you should try if you can, but don't sweat if you can't. Just spreading out in clusters 2 and 3 is sufficient, and building up a good fleet so that when red and blue move their ships out of the gates, then you are ready to strike. That'll be my recommendation for yellow. Okay, guys, we got the last one here, core conflict. This one is for advanced players only, and as you can probably guess, it's because it's really, really weird. So let's first look at what's removed. That's not what's super weird here. So we got gate clusters 3 and cluster 6 removed, and that's going to take out a couple of things. So this is just going to leave us with 3 material building slots on 2 planets, 3 fuel building slots on 2 planets, 4 weapon building slots on 3 planets, all 5 relic building slots on 3 planets, and then 3 psionic building slots on 2 planets. So this is reducing fuel, material, and psionics to just 3 planets, 3 building slots on 2 planets each. So it's kind of equalizing everything except for relic. Relic is untouched, and so relic is interesting here. But the thing you're probably all thinking is, what is going on with all the dots? So the starting positions are all on top of each other. And so the order is going to be red, then yellow, then blue. So red's going first, yellow's going second, and then blue's going last, but they have the first pick in the draft. So there's only 4 spots in each cluster, and all of them are filled in 1 and 2. But then cluster 5 is empty. In cluster 4, blue gets to start with ships just in the gate and has free access to 5 building slots. Yeah, yeah, that's true. Um, so this is an uneven, and some would say unfair setup, and that's on purpose. Um, this is just creating a very dynamic game state just off the bat, and we're going to talk about who can do what and why in just a second. But first, we're going to start with, because again, player order is red, then yellow, then blue. So red. So they're starting with 2 building slot material planet in cluster 1, and then 1 slot weapon planet in cluster 2. That's most likely going to be their starport. Things to think about. You have 2 building slots on material. Build starport. You can then catapult all your ships out and go to cluster 5, where there's a 2 slot psionic planet. You could alternatively just move your ships in gate 1 to gate 5 and then move them to the psionic planet, which is 2 moves. That's something else to consider too. I think that's what you got to do. You got to claim the best planet, and that's probably your best bet. You could go for a fuel planet, but that's going to be more moves because it's in cluster 4. So I think for red, going for that psionic planet makes a lot of sense. And then for the B, they're going to build up their ships, but they're going to be right next to blue ships most likely. And they're going to be right next to yellow with the 2 building slot relic planet. So it's going to be really tough. And yellow could collapse in with the ships in gate 2. And so you need to be mindful of, you need a different place to build ships. You can't just rely on that weapon planet in cluster 2 because yellow and blue may just gun for you. So you need another spot ASAP to build ships. So that's something to keep in mind. And that can be your material planet in cluster 1, or it could be wherever you expand. So yellow. So yellow starting with a relic planet in cluster 2 with 2 building slots, and then a fuel planet with just 1 building slot in cluster 1. You also have gate ships in gate 2. This is really, really awful setup for yellow. There's just no 2 ways around it. This is really, really bad. And let's talk about why. So the first reason is they need material building slot, but they're not close to one, and they could easily be attacked by another player. And they have no room to grow, and they can't catapult out easily. The only thing they could do is catapult to gate 1 or gate 4, where the other players are going to be. So I really don't like yellow's position here. So how do you fix it? Well, I think you got to contest blue for that cluster in 4. I think you just make a deal with them. Hey, I can go for this, you go for that. I think that makes a lot of sense. And then also try to bully red. I think that's another option, is you just bully red and try to raid them and just build up your ships and just bide your time and bully red. Particularly if red doesn't build up their ships in B and just moves somewhere else and tries to build somewhere else, you just bully red. I think that's the other option. And you can bully blue instead, but I think that's kind of what you see with your ships in C. So you build up your ships in A, build a starport there, and then what you can do is you pull back your ships from the gate to your starport, and then you catapult move from your starport to where you need to go. So I would just keep your ships in C and just wait, is probably what I would do, even though I don't like it. And you may just need to move a ship and just do some table talk to figure out what planet is okay for you to expand onto. All right, last player here is blue, and they have a pretty unique situation here, and it's pretty obvious for why, but the question is what do you do with this? And so you're starting with 2 building slot planet in cluster 1 on the weapon planet, then you have a Psionic Planet with a starport most likely in Cluster 2, and then you have Cluster 4 all to yourself by having ships in the gate to start. So you could do a material planet, a fuel planet. I would go for the fuel planet. Since you have a weapon city most likely, go for the fuel. Weapons and fuel go great together. So I would probably start with that and then expand from there. Go do a material city next. Maybe go for relics. I would not worry about cluster 5 at first, not for a while. And that's kind of what I would do here and kind of see and let the other players deal with it. But you may not want to do that. And one reason is if red gets a psionic city and a relic city, that may be too strong. And so I would perhaps not put all my ships, leave a ship behind in the gate and maybe move my ships and coordinate with yellow so that I could catapult move out of my psionic starport in cluster 2 and do something else. But I really like blue's position here. They get first pick in the draft, and then they get this cluster all to themselves. And they could even pivot away from cluster 4. If no one goes to cluster 5, it's theirs. Like, they also could do that instead. So that's my takeaways here. And overall, I think the 3-player cards are probably the best setup cards in the game, and they really make the game shine. And there's a lot of variety here and a lot to like. And I hope this was helpful. If it was, let me know. Thanks.